Okay, I just want to indicate, as I said, we ran a little long, so I assume Bob and Erwin will be coming along. So they've asked us to go back to reading the names for the days of learning. So I'm going to start with that. Hopefully that will give Bob and Erwin a chance to get on board, and then we'll start our text, all right? Sponsorships. Year of Learning, Del Bodlander, in memory of his wife, Adele Bodlander, Elbat Yehuda Tzvi. Dr. Paul Konigsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Konigsberg. Shimon Reuven ben Weibush, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Faradosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith. Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah Bas Ephraim, Yisrael David, Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. The many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova Bas Yisrael Dov. A Month of Learning by Gary and Marsha Schrager, in memory of his father David ben Yosef and his mother Freda Bas Hindel, by Dov Bodlander, in memory of his father Tzvi ben Yaakov Yitzchak, his mother Bela Devasha Bas Rav Dov Bear, his father-in-law Yehuda Tzvi ben David Nachum, and his mother-in-law Alta Chaya Bas Avram Yosef. A Week of Learning by Michael and Judith Poretsky, in memory of his father Gershon ben Chaim Tzvi, by Vicky Rabanovich Fish and Larry Fish, in memory of her mother, Etta Bat Tzvi, her father, Chaim ben Shlomo, his father, Avram ben Shlomo, the family of Malka Levi, in memory of her husband, Avram Chaim ben Zalman Leib, a Day of Learning plus Torah Fund, sponsored by Marsha Federbush, in memory of her father-in-law, Rav Shimon ben Tzvi Hirsch, and Day of Learning sponsored by Judy and Herb Jeremias, in memory of her mother, Sima Sarah Bat Tzvi Hirsch, B. and Stan Monsowitz, in memory of her father, Sam Zeltzer. May the Rashamas have an aliyah. And I don't remember all I used to say afterwards. To be honest, they'll have to get back to me. Shamas have an aliyah, refuah shlema, etc., etc. Okay? Eventually I'll relearn that. Okay, we're on the bottom of Yud Aleph, Amud Beis, the last line is where we're picking up. I'm going to start really the next before the line from the Mishnah. Part of the Mishnah said, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Lachin. Implication is that Rabbi Eliezer required 2 lechis, right? So they asked Rabbi Eliezer, Lechiyin v'korah ka'amar? When he said 2 lechis, did he also imply there had to be a korah, a crossbeam? Or dilma lechayin below korah ka'amar? Or question is, does he say just 2 lechis and no crossbeam? Tashmas is a braita. We're going to get another story. Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer shehalach etzel Rabbi Yossi ben Pereda. So an incident where Rabbi Eliezer went and he was visiting his student, Rabbi Yossi ben Pereda, right? Talmido, la'ochlin, right, or la'ovlin, all right, in the community of Ovlin, umatsu sheyoshev b'mabui, and he found him dwelling off an alleyway. I don't think he dwelled in the alley, okay, per se. All right, she'em lo ela lechi echad, but this alleyway only had a single lechi. Amar lo, he said to Bani, aseh lechi acher, my son, make another lechi, right, implying that Rabbi Eliezer required 2 lechis. Amar lo, he said to him, b'chi lesot mo, ani tzarich, do I have to close it off? In other words, do I have to seal off the entranceway? Okay. Amar le isatem. He said to him basically, okay, that that he indeed let it be sealed off. And so what of it? You know, the adjustment is necessary. Okay. Now that might imply that Rabbi Eliezer felt you needed something more tangible, I was going to say, to show that the area, that there's a part, as if it's a partition and that the purpose was not simply heker. Okay? Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Now we get to, and Braita continues. Lo nechlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel al mabui shehu pachot me'arba amot she'enot tzurich klum. Okay? Arguing that the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who, by the way, remember, only felt on a separate issue, Lavud was 4, not 3. But here he's saying that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel only argued, okay, about a situation where the entrance was less than 4 amos. And that's why I mentioned the issue of Lavud there. If it was less than 4. Al ma nechlaku, what did they argue about? Al rachav me'arba amot va'ad eser. They argued on a situation where the opening of the mabui was minimally 4 amos, but less than 10 amos. Okay? That seems to be the issue. Shebeit Shammai omrim, lechi v'kora, that Beit Shammai says you needed both a lechi and a kora. Beit Hillel omrim, o lechi, o kora. And Beit Hillel said it could be either a lechi or a crossbeam, a kora. Now, Gemara wants to continue. Having cited this incident, okay, the Gemara comes back to the situation between Rabbi Yossi ben Pereda and Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, Katani Mihat, nevertheless, says the Braita, it was taught as follows. When he asked him the question, when Rabbi Yossi ben Pereda asked him, V'chi l'sotmo ani tzarich, when he asked basically, is it necessary to seal basically the mavui entrance? I amart b'shlema l'chayin v'kora mishum hachiyama. If you're going to say that when Rabbi Eliezer said you needed the 2 lechayim, his intent was 2 lechis and a korah, okay, then we can understand v'chi l'satmo ani tzarich. Then we can understand Rabbi Yossi's response, okay? Ela I amart l'chayin below korah. But if you're going to say that it was 2 lechis without a crossbeam, ma'i l'satmo. How do we say that that is something that seals it off? And why would he have even said something like that, right? In other words, what's the implication? So from the Braita, it would seem that Rabbi Eliezer really implied 2 lechis and a korah. Hachi kamar, says the Gemara. This is what Rabbi Eliezer really intended to say. V'chi l'satmo v'lechayin ani tzarich. In other words, that Rabbi Yossi ben Pereda was saying, if you're requiring me to put 2 lechis, do I need then to seal it off with the 2 lechis? Okay, that this shows that indeed Rabbi Eliezer requires a korah in addition to the 2 lechis. Now, Gemara wants to continue. Amamar, says the text said before. We come back to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Marmar says Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Lo nechlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel al mabui shepachot me'arba amot. That their argument was really not in regards to an entranceway of a mabui that was less than 4 amos, but one that was 4 amos plus. She'enot tzurich klum. That small an opening less than 4 amos doesn't need anything. But, says the Gemara, V'ha'anantnan, but weren't we taught elsewhere in another Braita, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, Amar Talmid Echad Lefnei Rabbi Akiva, that a certain student said before Rabbi Akiva, Lo nichlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel al mabui shahu pachot me'arba amot shahu nitar o belechi o bekora. So the student said, didn't he teach before Rabbi Akiva that in a mabui whose opening was less than 4 amos, it would be sufficient and permissible, okay, to carry within that mavui, only adjusting it through a lechi or a korah. Now, we go on. What happened? An answer. Amar Rav Ashi Hachika Amar. Says Rav Ashi, this is what he means to say. Eino tzarich lechi v'korah. When he says that he does not need a lechi or a korah, okay, kebeit Shammai, that is according to the view of Beit Shammai. V'lo lechaim keRabbi Eliezer, and not 2 lechis, excuse me, as according to Rabbi Eliezer. Ela o lechi o korah kebeit Hillel. But rather, or either a lechi or a korah, a crossbeam, as according to Beit Hillel. So, the Kama asks the Gemara now, right? How much, in other words, how narrow does it have to be, okay, to require it? Amar Rav Achle, ve'item Rav Yechiel. So it says Rav Achle, and others say it was Rav Yechiel. Okay, Ad Arba'a. Okay, it has to be up to 4 tfachim wide. Now, says the Gemara, Amar Rav Sheshis, Amar Rav Yirmiyah. Right, the following. Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Right, this is again going to make a comparison. Modim Chachamim, the Rabbi Eliezer, the Pasei Chatzar, that the rabbis did agree with Rabbi Eliezer in regarding use of boards, okay, if you're talking about the entrance to a courtyard, which would imply then that you need to have a board on either side of the entrance to the courtyard. That would be the 2, right? At least that. So Gemara says, right? Going on. V'Rav Nachman Amar Halacha Rabbi Eliezer b'Pasei Chatzer. And Rav Nachman says the law is like Rabbi Eliezer in terms of the entrance area to a Chatzer, that the 2 boards are needed. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Man Modi. Who is it that when it says that the sages acknowledged Rabbi Eliezer, right? Who is it that acknowledged it? Rebbe, right? It was Rebbe, okay? Because why? We're going to hopefully see in a moment, okay? Halacha miklal de plige. From the fact that they had to say the law is like so-and-so, this infers that there was an argument. Man paligale. Let's include that. So who was it that argued against him? Rabbanan, it was the rabbis. The Tanya who taught, Chatzer niteret b'pas echad. They said, okay, that entering a courtyard, it was sufficient, it was permitted with a single board. Rebbe Omer b'shnei pasim. But Rebbe said it had to have 2 boards. Okay? Based on what? We'll see. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, as said elsewhere by Rabbi Asi and Rabbi Yochanan, Chatzar tzricha shnei pasim, that a courtyard, right, entering the courtyard needs 2 boards, right? 1 on each side. Now, okay. So continuing, Amarle Rabbi Zera, the Rabbi Asi. So Rabbi Zera says to the Rabbi Asi, Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? V'ha'atu da'amrat, mishmei the Rabbi Yochanan. But it was you who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Pasei Chatzer, Tzrichin, sheyehe behen arba, that the boards, right, entering the to enter into the courtyard, the width of the boards must be at least 4 tfachim, right? That's what it's implying, okay? That maybe if you had one board that was 4 tfachim, that would be sufficient, which was not the view of Rebbe, but instead the view of Rabbanan, right? V'chi tema arba'a mikan, v'arba'a mikan. And if you're saying each of the two boards has to be 4 tfachim, 4 on one side and 4 on the other side, v'hatani, wasn't it taught, Rav Ada bar Abimi, Kame de Rabbi Chanina, that Rabbi Ada bar Abimi in front of Rabbi Chanina, va'amrei la Kame de Rabbi Chanina bar Papi, and others said it was before Rabbi Chanina bar Papi, Ktana Ugdola be'achat esrei. Okay, when we had that discussion, remember, of the smaller courtyard entering into the larger courtyard, where the smaller courtyard opening was 10 and the larger courtyard opening was 11, right? Ki salik Rabbi Zera mimei parsha beruach achat ma'aba'a. Okay, that in that particular case, Rabbi Zera explained it, right? The following, that Rabbi Zera, when he came back from a sea voyage, explained that in one direction, if it was 4, mishtei ruchot, in 2 directions, mashahu lakan, umashahu lakan, some amount on one side, and some amount, or in other words, we could say a minimum amount on one side, and a minimum amount on the other side. Vahadatani, right? But wasn't it then taught in that situation, Adabar Avimi, Rabbihi? Okay, and then didn't Adabar Avimi say that this reflects the opinion of Rebbe, right? V'savarla ka Rebbe Yossi. And he's saying that Rebbe then also held the opinion of Rebbe Yossi, namely that 3 tfachim was the minimum amount necessary for a lechi. So if Rebbe held, and generally you needed 2 lechis, okay, therefore you'd have a total of 6, which would satisfy the issue of the minimum of 4. Amar Rav Yosef. And so we come back now, says the Gemara, to another situation. Since we began talking about using 2 pasim, 1 pas, 1 board or 2 boards for chatzer, we're now taking a slight digression, I'll call it, okay, and pick up with the following. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yosef, and the name of Rav Yehuda and Amar Shmuel. Chatzar niteret bepas echad, that a courtyard, he argues, is going to be permitted, okay, with 1 single board, all right? That would seem to be, okay, on the side. So what happens? Amar le Abaye the Rav Yosef. And Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Mi amar Shmuel hach. Did Shmuel really say that? V'ha'amar le Shmuel Rav Chananya bar Shila. But wasn't there a situation where Shmuel said to Rav Chananya bar Shila, At lo ta'avid uvda, ela o berov dofen, o b'shnei pasim, that I don't want you to render a halachic decision in regards to a ruvin unless it's a situation that you can, for a chatzer, remember, unless you can base it either on the fact that you have the majority of sides, which remember we saw the majority has to be closed in more than open areas, or that it has two boards. Amarle, va'ana lo yadana, de uvda hava bedura de ra'uta. And Rav Yosef's response was, I didn't know, right, about this halachic decision in regards to the town, the village, the shepherd's village. Right? What happened there? Says the Gemara. Let's see. Lashon yam hanichnas lechatzer hava. It was a situation where an inlet of water came in, right? And you can see a picture on 12A3, opposite note 20, right? A tongue of the sea, an inlet came in, okay, to that area. Va'ata lekame de Rav Yehuda, and it came before, the Shaila came before Rav Yehuda. V'lo itzricha ela pas echad, and he only required, okay, a single board to serve as the lechi on one side of the inlet, right? Amarle lashon yam kamart, but you just said it was an inlet of water. And what do we know? Kalhu, this was a leniency. Shehekelu chachamim b'mayim, that the sages made a leniency in regards to water. Okay? Right? So, in other words, we got a situation here. So what happens? Kidabai mine Rabbi Tavla me Rav. Okay, and this was similar to a dilemma that was raised by Rabbi Tavla with Rav. Mechitzat tluya. If we have a situation where we have a suspended wall, okay, right? I'm going to explain that in just furthermore in a second. Mechitzat tluya mahu shatatir b'churva. If we have some sort of suspended wall, okay, that's hanging down in a ruin, right, is it permissible to carry in that ruin? Amarle, ein mechitzat tluya materet ela b'mayim, that no such suspended wall permits carrying, with the only exception being with regard to water, right? Kalhu, because a leniency was made in regards to water, shehekelu chachamim b'mayim, that the sages made this leniency with regards to water. Mikol makom kasha. Nevertheless, in any way, at any rate, it's difficult. Ki atu Rav Papa, the Rav Huna, berei the Rav Yehoshua. And we now come to a further statement that when Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, came, mibei Rav Pirshua, and they came from the academy of Rav, okay, they explained Shmuel's ruling as follows. Okay, miruach echad ba'arba'ah. If it's in one direction, okay, it has to be at least a lechi of at least 4, right? 4 tfachim. Mishtei ruchot. But if you have 2 pasim, 2 boards, mashahu lakan, mashahu lakan, a minimum amount on one side, a minimum amount on the other. Whoa, says the Gemara, right? Amar Rav Papa, I kashali, ha kashali. Rav Papa says, if this was problematic for me, okay, I'm going to tell you what was my problem, what I had the difficulty with, right? Namely as follows. The Amar le Shmuel l'Rav Hananya bar Shila. Okay? That Shmuel had said to Rav Hananya bar Shila, Ad lo ta'avid uvda, that you don't render a halachic decision, ela o berov dofen, o b'shnei pasim. Okay? Either with a situation of the majority of walls, and we said that, remember, meant majority of walls standing more than open spaces, or two boards. Lama li rov dofen. Why did he use and include the possibility of majority of walls standing? But pas arba'a sagi. It should have been simply enough for him to tell him, just tell them they need one board that has to be a width of 4 tfachim. V'chitema mai berov dofen. Okay? And when he says that it is the majority, okay, of the major part of the wall, right? What is he telling about? Okay, my berov dofen, bedofen shiv'ah. Okay, he's telling him, in a sense, that we are talking about a board that would seem to be 7 tfachim. The arba'ah havale rov dofen. But the question would seem to be that if it had 4, that would have been enough of a wall. Lama li arba'ah. Why then does it have to be 4? Okay. Bishlema umashu sagi. Okay. If that's the case, you could have said it was 3 and a little bit more would have been enough. The ha'amar Rav Achli, because wasn't it said by Rav Achli, V'itema Rav Yechiel ad arba? And others say it was Rav Yechiel who said up till 4, if that was the opening. He buy it. And so therefore we now get to the point that the entrance, okay, of the area, okay, that is less than 4, why would it need anything? Okay? And so that's our point clearly here. Now, the Gemara is not satisfied with that answer. And it proceeds with another option, another alternative. Ibayat Ema. If you want, I might say it as follows and suggest the following. Right? Kan b'chatzer, kan b'mabui. In one instance, we have a situation regarding a courtyard. In another, we have an instance regarding an alleyway. So we could have different requirements for each of them. Right? We could say that in one case, Shmuel felt one was appropriate, and in another case, Shmuel felt it was different. Amount was needed. Okay. Or I'll give you another possible answer. V'ibayit Ema. If you want, I could say, to Rav Achlei Gufei Tna'ahi, that with regards to Rav Achlei, he himself felt that there was a Tanaitic dispute here, based on the following. Tanu Rabbanan, that the rabbis taught in a Braita, Lashon Yam Hanichnas Lechatzer, if you have an inlet of water that approaches and encroaches, the courtyard, Ein Memal'im Himena b'Shabbat. We are not permitted to fill, let's say, barrels or pails from that water on Shabbos. אלא אם כן יש לו מחיצה גבוהה 10 טפחים. Unless we say that we have a partition 10 tfachim high, okay? And that has to be built, it would seem, to in the inlet, okay? B'med varim amarim, shepirtzato bioter mi-10. That's a situation where the opening of the inlet is greater than 10 tfachim. Aval 10 ein sarich klum. But if it's simply 10 or less, we don't need anything. So the Gemara then says, Mimela, hu delo mimalina. Okay, that in any case, it seems that we're forbidden to draw the water from this inlet that's in the Chatzer. Ha-tiltule matal talina. Okay, but the implication is that maybe inside that Chatzer, we're still able to carry. V'hanifritza Chatzer bimlo'a lamakom ha'asur la. But since the Chatzer has been breached in its entirety, right? Therefore, in other words, at least the 10 plus, therefore that renders the Chatzer no longer viable for carrying. It's prohibited. Okay. Let's go on to Yud Bet Amud Beis. Okay. Top of the Amud. Hacha b'may yaskina. What are we then talking about here? Okay. De'id le gedudi. We're talking about the fact that there are gedudei, there are remnants, okay, of the wall of the Chatzer that had been broken, that was still there in the water. Okay? And that's how we finish that discussion. Okay. As we look at the next new material in the Gemara, okay, we come back, okay, to the issues of using the lechi and the korah. Okay. Now, quickly to introduce it, I just want to point out, okay, that it could be that one might argue, okay, or present the idea that maybe if you use one item as an adjustment, a lechi, maybe that reflects more the view that we're concerned about a partition. Or maybe we could argue if you use simply a korah, okay, maybe that reflects the perspective that it's simply a heker, right? But let's see if the Gemara is going to take us in that direction. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda now is going to give us a statement. Right? Mabui shelo nishtatfu bo. Okay. If we have a alleyway where those who live off the alleyway have not participated, okay, participated in what? We're going to call it a shituf, right? An erev chatzerot, right? Ichshiru belechi, right? He says they can adjust it with the use of a lechi. Hazorek letocho chayav. Okay, and what one who throws an object into that area, okay, let's say from the Rishus HaRabim, is chayav. Ichshiru bekorah. If he adjusted that area using a korah, being a crossbeam, hazorek letocho patur. One who throws something into it is exempt. Okay? Now, question, why would that be? Shouldn't they both have the same, right, parameters? Matkifla Rav Sheshet. Okay? Rav Sheshet challenges, and he objects to Rav Yehuda's statement by saying, Tama de lo nishtatfu bo. It seems to be that the reason you're giving is because they didn't participate in any shituf, in any, eruv, chatzerus there. Ha nishtatfu bo. But if they did participate, okay, afilu hikshiru b'korah, nami chayav. Then even if they adjusted it, okay, with a crossbeam, with a korah, it would seem that they should also then be obligated by throwing. Ki kar zo asa oto reshut hayachid o reshut harabi, and you're going to say simply by doing a shituf, okay, in which, remember, we're going to have to put some bread or something, food stuff, into that to make it instead considered a single household as opposed to multiple. That's going to make the difference between it being considered a private domain and a public domain, right? Vahatanya, aren't we taught elsewhere in a Braita? Chatzerot shel rabim, okay, courtyards, right, that belong to many people, right? U'meva'ot she'enan mefulashot, and alleyways that are not closed. Bein ivu, bein shelo ivu, whether they had an eruv or not. Hazorek letochan chayav, one who throws something into them is chayav. Ela I itmar hachi itmar. But if it was said, this is what was intended, this was what was meant to be said. Amar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, mabui she'eino ra'ui l'shituf, a alleyway which is not suitable, let's say, for shituf, for participation, for an eruv chatzerus. Okay? For example, it could be an open mabui. Okay? And that therefore, since it's open at two sides, all right, it could not, it's problematic. Hichshiru b'lechi, and if they attempted to address it with simply a lechi, hazorek l'tocho chayav. Okay, then one who throws from Reshus Harabim into that mabui is chayav. Hichshiru b'korah, if they, however, adjusted it, let's say, with a crossbeam, hazorek l'tocho patur. Right. One who throws into it would then be exempt. Alma, therefore, this seems to be telling us, kasavar, seems to be of the opinion, lechi mishum mechitza, v'korah mishum heker. That a lechi is symbolic of making it considered a partition, and a crossbeam is more like it's a symbolic recognition. V'chein amar Rava. And likewise, he says this is what Rava also stated. Okay? Lechi mishum mechitza, v'korah mishum heker. Okay? In other words, that given that they may have had a different concept, I'm going to say, of the purpose, and we saw all along that this was a machloket, what was the purpose of this adjustment? It wasn't simply to be able to carry. It was a simple of, were you reminding people that you were going from one reshus to another? Or were you really considering it as if you're closing off the mabui and therefore making it a reshus, right, of one kind? The Rava Amar, okay, and now we see, okay, Rava, what did he say? The following, right? Echad zeh ve'echad zeh mishum heker. Rava, on the other hand, did not go along with that. He said they both serve as reminders. Okay? So, again, the Art Scrolls note points out to us that he did not hold, as in that case, as Rav did. Okay. As Rabbah, did. So Rava held differently. Now, ATV. So Gemara wants now to show that there is a challenge, right? Rabbi Yaakov bar Abba the Rava. So he challenges, excuse me, Rava's view that they both serve the same conceptual purpose by citing the following Braita, right? Hazorek lemabui, yesh lo lechi chayav. One who throws an item from Reshus Harabim into the alleyway, and the alleyway has a lechi, that person is still obligated. Chayav. Ein lo lechi patur. If it has no lechi, he's exempt. Hachi ka'amar. Says this is what he really means to say. Okay? Right? Namely what? That the Braita is telling us, Eino tzarich ela lechi. It needs only minimally, it needs at least a lechi. Hazorek letocho chayav. And therefore, okay, it's as if the lechi clearly acts as a partition. That's why when he throws something into the mabui from the Reshus Harabim, he would be chayav. Lechi v'davar acher. However, if it has a lechi and something else, okay, either another lechi, as we saw by Rabbi Eliezer, or maybe it also has a korah, right? Hazorek letocho patur. That in that case, one who throws is exempt, because there it only seems to be an example of an open mabui, okay? Because why? Because you have one at one side of the mabui in an open mabui, and something else at the other side, the other end, okay, of the mabui. And therefore, right, one can consider it that reshus. ATV. But we will challenge this again. Another challenge to Rava. Yet there alkein. Furthermore, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, Mi sheyesh lo shnei bati. Take the example of somebody, he says, Rabbi Yehuda, one owns two homes, one opposite the other, we're going to see. B'shnei tzidei reshus harabi. And the two homes are on the public thoroughfare, but one house is opposite the other. Okay? Oseh lechi mikan, belechi mikan. Maybe he could put a lechi on one side and a lechi on the other side. Okora mikan v'kora mikan, or a cross beam on one side and another cross beam on the other side. V'noseh v'notein be'emtza. And now, theoretically, he set himself up between the two houses, a reshus yachid, and he can carry stuff back and forth, one to the other. Okay? Amrulo, they said to him, in other words, they responded to this idea, sages, Ein ma'arvin reshut harabim b'chach, that it's no way that you can set up an eruv and establish that as a private domain. Hatam kasava Rabbi Yehuda, shtei mechitzot deoraita. There, it would seem that Rabbi Yehuda must be of a certain opinion, okay, that the, right, basically that the two are sufficient, the two partitions are sufficient based on the Torah to make it a Reshus Yachid. Okay, and that would imply that the lechi is only a heker, right? A reminder. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, Mabui she'arko kirachvo. Okay, that may be similar to a situation of an alleyway where its length and width are the same. Eino natar belechi mashu. Okay, in that situation, he says, it doesn't work. All right, carrying that mabui where the length and the width is the same, a korah is not sufficient. Okay, with simply a lechi of a minimum amount. Amar Rav Chia. It says Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Says in the name of Rav as follows. Mabui she'arko kirachvo. If you have an alleyway where its length and its width, okay, are the same, eino natar b'korah tefach. It's also not permitted with a crossbeam that's only the width of a tefach. Amar Rabbi Zera. And now Rabbi Zera is going to tell us, Kama, mechuvanim shmata desabe. So he says to us an interesting statement, how incisive, I'm going to translate it, okay, is the statements of our elders, okay? And what does he mean by that? Kevan de arko kirachlo, havale chatzer. Namely, he's going to argue that if that's the case, if its length and its width, okay, are equal, it's very similar to the status of a courtyard, okay? And what do we say there, okay? V'chatzer eino niteret b'lechi v'korah, ele b'pas arba'ah. And a courtyard carrying in it is not permitted only by use of a lechi and korah, but rather we need a board that has 4 tfachim. Amar Rabbi Zera, ikashali hakashali. If there's a problem here, this is what's problematic for me. But this is the problem, right? Lahave hai lechi kipas mashu. So let this lechi, okay, be the equivalent of like a board of a certain amount, vinishtare, and let them be permitted to carry. Let that be an acceptable. So instead of a lechi of, let's say, 2 or 3 tfachim, we'll make the lechi the equivalent of a pas, at least 4 tfachim, put it up there, and shouldn't that be right? Not only that, but he could say, I'll take that example and I won't put the lechi flush against the side of the wall of the mabui. I'll put it sticking out into the entranceway. So Gemara, however, comes and tells us the following. Ishtamit te, right? He, I don't want to say forgot, okay, but it escaped his attention. Ha da amar Rabbi Asi, amar Rabbi Yochanan. That which Rabbi Asi taught in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, pasei chatzer tzrichin sheyehe ba'en arba'ah. That the boards to permit the carrying inside the courtyard must be a minimum width of 4 tfachim. Amar Rav Nachman, naktinen ezehu mabui shenitar b'lechi v'korah. And Rav Nachman therefore responds, but we hold a tradition. Under what circumstances, what kind of mabui is it where we do permit carrying use by using either a lechi or a korah? Okay.
Kol she'orcho
Kol
yosher machlo.
she'orcho yater al. It's got to be a mabui where the length is greater than the width.
The width.
Not only that, he says, Rav Nachman, ubatim v'chatzerot petuchim l'tocho, that there's got to be homes and courtyards, I'm going to say, emptying into that mabui. Ve'ezahu chatzer she'einani teret b'lechi v'korah. And then for what is a courtyard where it is not, where the use of lechi and korah is not sufficient to permit carrying? Ela b'pasar ba'ah. It's got to be a situation where we need a board of 4 tfachim. Okay? So the Gemara then continues and tells us, okay, the following. Okay? Kol shemeruba'at, right? What he says here, any courtyard that's square. If it's not square, then maybe it's not considered a courtyard. Maybe it's only going to be considered a mabui, and therefore lechi and korah would then be acceptable. Mirubat and agulalo, asks the Gemara. You say to be considered a courtyard, it has to be squared and couldn't be perhaps round, right? A round courtyard. That's not adjustable. Okay, you'd consider that a mabui instead. Hachikamar. This is what he means to say. I yater al rachva. If the length is greater than the width, right? If that's the case, hava le mabui. That we would consider a alleyway. Umabui belechi v'korah sagya. Okay, and as far as an alleyway goes, a lechi or a korah, right, is sufficient, right? That's what we say. V'ilo, and if not, hava lechatzer. Then we would consider it a courtyard. V'kama. So we ask for a definition of how much more, right, does the length have to be than the width? Savar Shmuel l'meimar ad de'ika pi shnayim berachava. Shmuel thought to say that it's got to be, the length has got to be twice the width, right? Amar le Rav. And Rav says to him and follows, Hachi amar chavivi. This is what my dear uncle Rav Chia said. Afilu mashu. Even if it's a small amount, okay, then we could consider something a mabui and act leniently by allowing simply a korah or a lechi. And that does make a lot of sense because the whole issue of adjusting is a derabanan. So we can always say it could have the kula. Okay? Now, I'm just going to pick up a tiny bit. Okay? Our next Mishnah. Our next piece is from the Mishnah. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amar Talmid Echad V'chulei. Okay, about the story of the one student, right, who came before Rabbi Akiva and basically argued what was the machloket of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Okay, so that's where we go tomorrow. Okay, it's not a short Gemara tomorrow's, and that's why I said we'll stop here right now. Okay, but I suggest, okay, that you keep in mind what we saw here. But even though the Gemara looks long, it's not significantly difficult because part of it is an Agadata story about Rabbi Meir. Okay, and in that Agadata, you'll see there's a question as to who Rabbi Meir followed under certain circumstances, but it's a nice Misa. It's a nice story. So should be able to move through that part pretty quickly. Okay, that covers at least a good part of the Amud on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Okay, so everybody have a good Shabbos. Stay well and take care, everybody.
Good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much.
Good Shabbos, Kenny, good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Good
Take care,
Shabbos.
everybody.
Shabbos, Rabbi.
Travis.
Get a picture up here.
Okay, you gotta leave. Here's the thing to leave.